Yes, indeed. Hello, hello, hello. We are on the Loyalty and Friends podcast. And who are my friends, LP? Who are my friends, my brother?
We all are your friends.
Yes, indeed. And we have an amazing friend today, Miss Christina Conti. And we've had part
Hello.
one of our interview. So if you want to catch part one, definitely go to the Instagram Live, the Loyalty in Everything page, okay, on Instagram. And you can catch that live. And that's no slang, okay? So spell it out. Loyalty, the word N-I-N, everything, okay? To get the part one of the episode. And this episode is all about spreading awareness for epilepsy, showing people how they can also live well with epilepsy. And who better else to tell us about it than the great queen, Miss Christina Conti. I'm so excited to have you here on the
Thank you
second
for
part
having
of this
me again.
interview. Yes. So what we're gonna do is, because I know some people may or may not know, we want to still just give an introduction real quick so they can know who you are, Queen, and then we're gonna get into the second phase of the questions for you tonight.
Sure. So, hi again. My name is Christina Conti, and I'm super happy to be here. Thank you, Loyalty, for having me, and LP. Um, I'm 21 years old, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about epilepsy and about my experience and kind of share my knowledge from when I was diagnosed.
Yes, you are. So, just to give a little background, our sister here, Christina, was diagnosed at a very young age. She was only 6 years old when they diagnosed her with epilepsy, and I can understand how that can be challenging for one because you're such a at a very young age and you don't even understand what's going on yourself. So for doctors to attempt to verbalize this for you can be, I'm pretty sure, pretty challenging. And
Definitely.
so how long do you think it took for you to really get that under control?
I mean, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I still uh, struggle to accept that the things that I have to deal with everyday life, unfortunately. But I would say that somewhere around becoming a teenager, I really got a hold on things as it really got better for me. The symptoms eased a lot as I started to get older. Um, and I just, I leaned on my faith a lot, and I was just able to realize that everybody has something going on. This was just my thing that I have going on, and have to learn to live with it.
Right. And it doesn't change who you are, and you are
No.
beautiful, by the way. I have to tell
Oh,
you
thank
that.
you.
Slave.
Thank you so
No, yes,
much.
you're welcome. So, some of the questions I wanted to ask you that I didn't ask in the first part was, what activities should epileptics avoid?
Right. So, that again, I know I said this on Instagram. Um, Epilepsy is a very person to person condition, meaning it really depends on the person what things you should avoid and what things you can do. Um, in other words, what things trigger your seizures. For a large sum of people with epilepsy, anything with flashing lights is a big no-no. So like roller coasters, things like that, laser tag. It was never really a problem for me. It was never a trigger for me, but I know it is for a huge sum of people that have epilepsy. Another thing that this is all across the board, no matter who you are. Um, if you have epilepsy, you need a larger amount of sleep than normal. So, those late nights, of course, we're human. I like to have fun. Everybody likes to have fun. But we definitely need to keep that limited as lack of sleep is a huge trigger for me personally and for a lot of people that have epilepsy.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. And
Yeah.
also, so my next question would be, how does epilepsy affect daily activities?
Yeah, so when I was growing up and I was in school, it would affect the way that I was in the classroom. So my friendships with people, became kind of weird sometimes because people don't understand what's happening when you're having a seizure. So things like that, kind of having to take this extra time out of your day and your life to over explain yourself to people. That's not something that the average person has to do. Um, Again, the sleep thing, that definitely affects things. You know, being a college student, you definitely have those late nights where you're up studying, and I'm a college student who works too, so those late nights with working and studying can be a challenge sometimes. So I've definitely had to work hard to kind of find that balance of what's healthy for me. So it just takes a little extra work to find ways around it. Um, so yeah, things like that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hmm.
So, how do you advocate for epilepsy?
So I'm an ambassador for the Epilepsy Foundation of America. Essentially, the foundation and the ambassadorship program is just a way to connect other people in the community who have epilepsy and people who honestly just want to advocate for it and people who want to kind of have a centralized base for finding ways to spread awareness, or this is the place where I go if I want to learn something, because I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, I just go off of my experience. But this is kind of my central spot where I go and where I learn ways to and different avenues for advocating and different fundraisers and things like that. So definitely my involvement with the foundation has been my main way that I've been able to advocate.
That's amazing. And I do feel like, sometimes life experience is the best experience you can give anyone because you
Yeah,
through it and you know what the journey is, you can speak to it. So, you're able to also be, show empathy for those who are also going through something similar and let them know, like, hey, you're not alone. Trust me, I've been through it, I could tell you some things, that helped me and vice versa. So I think that's amazing for one because again it just speaks more and it gives you more tools to work with through your own life experiences.
for sure.
Yeah, so if someone like myself wanted to advocate, like what does the process look like?
So it's a very simple process. It's essentially as easy as finding the foundation. There's a few different foundations out there for epilepsy. So finding some one that you want to be involved with, and honestly just applying and sharing why you want to be involved. And almost always they will more than likely be happy to have you as a part of the team. It's a very easy process because the more advocates we have for a condition that isn't spoken about enough, the better. So anyone can do it.
Yes, indeed. So y'all here listening, if you want to be an advocate, it's not hard. I would advise you all go to the website so you can be a supporter. And I think that I'm pretty sure they can use all hands on deck for sure. So it's nothing wrong with supporting something that you may not be experiencing, yourself. But if you want to just be that helping hand and just spread more awareness, tap in. So thank you for answering that. So my next question for you would be, what are some things that have triggered epilepsy for you, or just in general?
Yeah. So my first seizure that I had when I was a kid that um elicited the diagnosis was completely unprovoked. Nobody knows where that came from. But as my life went on and seizures continued to happen here and there, it became obvious that it was probably linked to stress, which is honestly a huge trigger for a lot of people. And for someone with epilepsy, stress, we kind of, in society standards, we kind of underplay how much of an effect stress can have on our health. But it can really affect our physical health. I know we always talk about how it affects our mental health, but it affects our physical health too, to a great degree. And me specifically having epilepsy, stress has taken a major toll on me. So that was my main trigger, that I realized on my own, to bring on seizures. Like in times like midterms or finals, if I'm going through something with family or friends or anything like that, I notice that I'm more symptomatic in those times.
Mm. Thank you for that. And you're right. Like stress can bring on so many things. So it's not always just something mentally,
Right.
challenges. There are some physical challenges, like even people who suffer with, panic attacks, anxiety,
Absolutely.
that nature. A lot of those things are brought on strictly from stress. So
Totally.
it's best to do some things, to kind of keep your stress levels down to a minimum and, to keep you at peace for the most part, I would truly say. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
My next question is, what are 4 risk factors for epilepsy?
So, obviously, if you're having a seizure where you are convulsing, you can seriously hurt yourself. Whether if you're in a standing position and you start having a seizure, you could fall down and you could seriously hurt your head or any part of your body, depending on where you're falling from. So injury to any part of the body is definitely a risk factor. Driving is something that is a huge risk for people with epilepsy. I recently, actually around this time last year, I had a seizure, and my neurologist actually revoked my license to drive for 6 months, until she was sure that I was okay to drive. Because of course, if you're driving and you have a seizure, not only are you putting your own life at risk, but you're putting others' lives at risk too.
Mm.
So driving is a huge risk factor. Another thing I would associate epilepsy and risk with would be uh, like your diet. Honestly, some people have these very strict dietary constrictions. For example, not so much for me anymore, but when I was little, I was strictly instructed not to eat gluten because it could cause flare-ups. Um, Things like that. It's super random, but it's true. Um, Another thing would honestly just be the genetics of it. If you are someone that's looking to have kids and you have epilepsy, it's a possibility that your offspring are going to have epilepsy. It's also a possibility that they're not, but it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, that is so true. So thank you so much. That's all the questions I have. So I want to pass it over to my co-host, Mr. LP Larry Penton in the building. And he has his own podcast as well. So I'm pretty sure he's gonna ask for you to also be a guest on his
Okay.
podcast for sure. And hey, the more look, that's just more exposure, Queen. So
No, definitely.
take it, into consideration for sure. So with that being said, LP, I'm passing the torch to you, brother.
Thank you very much. For those that don't know, I am LP. I am a retired paramedic and a firefighter. So this is right up my alley. This is something that was my bread and butter. This is something that I've dealt with in the field as a paramedic for 15 years. Had many, 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 many patients with different forms of epileptic seizures, from the absent seizures, which they call those the petit mal. Typically, those are with minors, with little kids. And like you said, Christina, where you're kind of just staring off in space. And
Yep.
sometimes teachers confuse that with daydreaming, or they'll say, oh, this is, they're not paying attention. Maybe they have a mental health issue like ADD or like that. You have all kind of different seizures that are out there, and you talk about some of those things. What I always tell people is, first and foremost, when it comes to seizures, that is an immediate danger for the patient. It also is something that the bystanders and the family members or the caregivers have to be aware of on what to do immediately, because as you said, it's basically like your brain is getting electrocuted during that time. And so some of the old school methods of helping somebody with a seizure would be put a spoon in their mouth or put a piece of wood or something in their mouth. And it's amazing how far medicine has come over the years. And I always say, if you see somebody having a seizure, especially where we're talking about, let's say the clonic seizures, where they're actually having the physical jerking, because you have those that are the tonic where they might not have any, they might just be stiff, no movement, you know, or you might have the atonic seizures where they just have they'll be standing up talking. You might be at a nightclub, and next thing you know, they just drop all of a sudden. You know, you have, like I said, the clonic seizures where they're shaking, and it might affect the neck or the back or the arms or both sides of the body. And you have those myoclonic seizures where it might jerk a little bit and stop, and it might jerk a little bit and then stop. You have the grand mal seizures, which are the full blown seizures where they look like they're actually being electrocuted. And then the more serious forms of those seizures, we call it status epilepticus. Status epilepticus. These are the seizures that they'll go on for 2 to 5 minutes, stop for maybe a minute. They'll happen again right after that for another 2 to 5 minutes, stop for maybe 30 seconds, and then it'll happen all over again. Those are the most serious forms of seizure activity. And when EMS comes on board, I'm going to show up, hey, let me get out the Ativan, let me get out the Versed. So these are anticonvulsant medications. Some people with seizures also have an implanted device. So I wanted to ask you about that. Can you tell the audience about this implanted device and how it works?
This is something that's new to me. This is something that I've never actually heard of. So I would love to learn more. Honestly, if you know any more about it, I've actually never heard of this.
Yeah. So people that have the more serious grand mal seizures, or they go into status epilepticus, where it just continues for X amount of time, stops, and then repeats itself. And those are at least 3 or more occasions. They have this implanted device where they carry around a specific strong magnet. And what happened, I had a patient one time, I was working at the airport in St. Louis. And so a lady got off a flight. She was on the flight with her dog and her husband. And the dog was a support animal. Now, this little dog knew when she would have seizures.
Okay.
The dog would do like this on her chest if he was holding her, or he would lay down flat and do like this. That was the signal that she's about to have a seizure, because they have a heightened sense of awareness. And so she carried around this round magnet. It looked like a little donut. And what you would do is take the magnet and you would wave it over because it would be implanted in the upper chest, and you wave it around over that implanted device, and it would stop the seizure activity. She gave the magnet to her husband, who was somewhere else. And so when she started having these seizures after she got off the plane, we couldn't stop it. I was giving her all this medication and all this stuff, and we were like maybe 10 minutes from the hospital. And so I asked her when she came out of the seizure, because every time she had one, she got weaker and weaker. And so she said, "Where's my magnet?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "I got my magnet, but I think my husband has it." And so as I called in the hospital, as we're en route to the hospital, I said, "Make sure that you have a magnet ready, because she's still going into the status epilepticus." And so as soon as we pulled into the ER, the doc met us in the ambulance bay, and we wheeled her in, and he was like, "Grab the magnet off the wall," to one of the nurses. So she grabs the magnet off the wall, and they had a real big one. And so he was like, boop. And she was like, and
Wow.
she kind of, about a minute later, she looked up. She was like, thank you so much. And he was like, look, don't move this magnet. Don't nobody touch it. I better not see it nowhere but in this room until she gets discharged, because they only had one in the ER. And so these are things that I tell people, you have to understand who you are and who you're with, because you may not understand how these things work if you're not educated on that. And for the strange
Absolutely.
and for the strangers, I always tell people you need to learn certain things, like learning first aid, learning CPR, learning how to use AED equipment and stop the bleed stuff, but also learn how to treat people that go unconscious from seizure activities. You want to turn them on their side. Typically, we always say left side, left lateral. So imagine just laying on your side. Don't put anything in their mouth.
Nope.
The reason you want to lay them on their side is if they start vomiting,
it doesn't kind of, yeah, exactly.
There's an old wise tale that people would, when they would put something in the mouth, they would say, "Oh, we don't want them to bite their tongue or swallow their tongue." Say,
yes, I've
you
heard
can't
this one.
swallow your tongue,
right?
You can't swallow your tongue, folks. That's just that's a misnomer. But you can bite your tongue, and that can cause bleeding, which can you can aspirate from that. So I only have one question for you. When you talk with other people about epilepsies and seizure activities, what do you want to leave the audience with in terms of the biggest myth that you've heard regarding kids and seizures? Because we know that sometimes, and you alluded to it, how kids sometimes get bullied about it. Sometimes it's looked at as a mental health issue and different things like that. Sometimes people that have migraines are thought to maybe have some seizure activity. What would you say to parents or strangers that you want to educate them about with seizures in children?
I think the biggest thing is just remembering that it's real, and that, of course, kids can embellish things all the time. Kids love to pretend, kids love to do that, but it's important that we also remember that a lot of the time kids are not pretending. And like you were mentioning in the beginning, like absence seizures, which are the kind of seizure I would have all the time when I was little, in school especially, just looking out for those signs and saying, wait a minute, is this a kid that's just not paying attention, or is there something going on here? So I honestly think just being aware of it and knowing that it's a possibility opens the door for that thought process to start to kick in adults, to start questioning whether this is something potentially, or it's a kid that maybe has another issue. So just watching out for the signs, I think, is something that adults need to be aware of, knowing that it's something that's very real. Because when I was little, I felt like a lot of the time adults didn't believe me, and they kind of would say abruptly out loud, like they would snap in my face. They would, say, "You're not paying attention. How could you miss that? I just said 10 minutes ago that we were going to go and read this book." And it's like, oh, I never even heard that, because, these absence seizures, you're completely not aware of what's happening. So instead of getting angry and instead of immediately turning to, "You're just a bad kid," let's start to think about what could really be going on.
Yeah, I like that concept. So I know 5 minutes before we go to Clubhouse, you all. So yes, we will be having an audio room on Clubhouse. Tap in. It is the Loyalty and Friends Club right there on Clubhouse. We would love to have you. Last but not least, I do want you to tell them how they can reach you. Like if they want to support in any way, form, and fashion, Christina, what's the best way to get in contact or support you?
Yeah, so I'm on all the basic social media handles. My Instagram, which is the Christina Conti, which is right here on the screen. My TikTok handle is Christina Conti with 3 I's on the end. And my Facebook is just Christina Conti. So my DMs are always open if anyone, has any questions about epilepsy or has epilepsy and is struggling with it and just needs to talk. So please use me and reach out to me if anything.
Yeah, so I want to thank you so much just for being a gracious guest here on the Loyalty and Friends podcast. And also, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel for sure. We want to get the followers up so we can have a bigger impact and a bigger community to really spread the awareness for sure. It is so important. So you can follow us here on the Loyalty in Everything YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Instagram at Loyalty in Everything, and that's the whole word spelled out, I-N, okay? No slang, Loyalty in Everything. As well as on TikTok. We are on TikTok and Facebook as well, okay? Loyalty in Everything. And also Twitter. If you come on Twitter, it's Loyalty in E as in Edward, V as in Victory, T as in Tom, okay? So we would love your support each and every Friday. You can look for pretty much to a new guest or spreading awareness about a new topic for sure. So thank you so much. You all, again, join us on Clubhouse, on the Clubhouse platform in the Loyalty and Friends podcast at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I love you guys, and we're going to go ahead and sign out and give you a few minutes in between.
All right. Thank you so much for having me again, and I will see you in a few minutes.
Awesome.
Peace and blessings, everybody.
Peace.